At 1:22 in the morning on June 24th, 2021, a 12-story condominium building in Surfside, Florida, collapsed in approximately 11 seconds. 98 people died. 402 people were left homeless. It was the deadliest accidental structural collapse in United States history since the 1981 Hyatt Regency walkway disaster. But here is what the headline never fully explained. The building had been inspected 3 years earlier. The engineer who conducted that inspection filed a written report with the building's homeowners association in October of 2018. That report described what he called major structural damage to the concrete slab below the pool deck. It described abundant cracking and spalling of concrete columns in the underground parking garage. It warned that the waterproofing below the pool deck had failed, and that water had been penetrating the concrete structure for years. The repair cost he estimated in 2018, $9 million. 3 years later, when the building came down, the cost was 98 lives. This is the story of Champlain Towers South. And the question this episode answers is not what collapsed. It is what was known and what was done about it before it did. Let's establish what we are dealing with. Surfside, Florida, a small barrier island town of approximately 6,000 permanent residents sitting between Miami Beach to the south and Bal Harbour to the north. Oceanfront real estate on this stretch of Florida's coast is among the most valuable in the United States. According to the Miami Association of Realtors, oceanfront condominium values in this corridor had increased by more than 40% in the decade before the collapse. Champlain Towers South sat at 8777 Collins Avenue. Built in 1981, 12 stories, 136 units. Oceanfront. According to the Miami-Dade County property appraiser's records, units in the building were valued between $300,000 and over $700,000 in the years before the collapse. The building was managed by its homeowners association, a volunteer board of elected resident representatives responsible for maintenance, repair decisions, and the building's reserve funds. That HOA and the decisions it made and did not make in the 3 years between the 2018 engineering report and the night of June 24, 2021, is at the center of this story. Champlain Towers South was constructed in 1981 during a boom period for South Florida condominium development. The building was designed by architect William Friedman and built by developer Nathan Reiber. For 4 decades, it stood as a desirable oceanfront address, well-located, well-maintained by the standards visible to residents, and consistently valued in one of Florida's most competitive real estate markets. Owners included permanent residents, seasonal occupants, and investors who rented units to short-term tenants. By 2021, according to the Miami Herald's investigation published in the months following the collapse, approximately 55 units were occupied at the time of the disaster. The building had a pool deck on the first floor level with an underground parking garage directly beneath it. That design detail, a pool deck waterproofed and poured on top of a concrete structure below grade, is where the story turns. Because waterproofing systems on concrete structures are not permanent, they degrade. And when they degrade and water begins penetrating reinforced concrete, the steel rebar inside the concrete begins to corrode. Corroding rebar expands. Expanding rebar cracks the concrete from the inside. Cracked concrete allows more water in. The cycle accelerates. Engineers have a term for the visible result of this process: spalling. The concrete literally flakes, chips, and falls away. In the underground parking garage of Champlain Towers South, this process had been visibly underway for years before anyone filed a formal report. Residents had noticed it. Maintenance staff had documented it. But it was not until October 2018 that a licensed structural engineer put it in writing, with photographs, measurements, and a cost estimate, and delivered it formally to the building's HOA. The engineer was Frank Morabito of Morabito Consultants, a licensed structural engineering firm based in Miami. The building had hired Morabito Consultants to conduct the inspection required under Miami-Dade County's 40-year recertification program, a mandatory structural review that buildings must pass at 40 years of age and every 10 years thereafter. The report Morabito filed on October 8, 2018 is a public document. It is 24 pages long. It contains photographs, it contains measurements, and it contains language that, in retrospect, reads as a precise description of what would happen 2 years and 8 months later. Morabito's report described the waterproofing below the pool deck as having failed. It described the concrete slab it was designed to protect as showing major structural damage. It described the underground parking structure, the columns, beams, and slab directly supporting the building above, as showing abundant cracking and spalling of concrete, and deterioration that required immediate attention. In his professional assessment, Morabito wrote that the failed waterproofing will need to be replaced, and that the longer the repairs are delayed, the worse the conditions will get. The estimated cost to repair the pool deck and parking structure, $9.1 million. That report was presented to the Champlain Towers South HOA. The board acknowledged it. They began the process of planning for the 40-year recertification repairs, and then the process slowed. What followed over the next 2.5 years is documented in the HOA's own meeting minutes, which were obtained and published by the Miami Herald and later entered into the public record of the National Institute of Standards and Technology investigation that followed the collapse. In November 2018, 1 month after the Morabito report, the HOA board presented the findings to residents. The minutes show that some owners pushed back on the projected costs. Repair assessments, the fees charged to individual unit owners to fund major building repairs, were a contentious subject. By the time of the repairs that were needed, the building's reserve fund held approximately $700,000. Against a $9.1 million repair estimate, the gap was significant. In April 2021, just 10 weeks before the collapse, the HOA board finally voted to move forward with the full repair program. A special assessment of $15 million was approved. The cost had grown in the intervening years, to be charged across unit owners. Some owners received notices of individual assessments ranging from $80,000 to over $330,000. Repair contracts were being finalized. Construction was scheduled to begin in the coming months, but there was another report, one that had not yet reached the full board or all residents. In April 2021, the same month the special assessment was approved, a structural engineer conducting preparatory work for the upcoming repairs observed what he described in internal communications as a significant increase in the concrete deterioration compared to what Morabito had documented in 2018. According to reporting by the New York Times, citing documents reviewed as part of the NIST investigation, this engineer flagged that conditions had worsened materially. That assessment did not result in an emergency evacuation order. It did not trigger an immediate halt to building occupation. On June 24, 2021, at 1:22 in the morning, the building came down. The search and rescue operation that followed was one of the largest in Florida's history. According to the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department, more than 400 rescue personnel from across the United States participated in the operation. For 2 weeks, search teams worked the debris field hoping to find survivors in voids within the collapse. None were found after the first hours. The final death toll, confirmed by Miami-Dade County authorities, 98 people, 24 nationalities represented among the victims. The youngest was 1-year-old. In the legal aftermath, the Champlain Towers South HOA, the building's developer, its engineers, and multiple contractors faced wrongful death and negligence lawsuits from survivors and victims' families. In May 2022, less than a year after the collapse, a $997 million settlement was reached. According to court filings in Miami-Dade Circuit Court, the settlement was funded by multiple defendants including the HOA's insurer, the development entity, and engineering firms connected to the building's history. It was approved by the court in June 2022. At the federal level, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, launched a formal technical investigation into the collapse. As of the time of this episode, that investigation remains ongoing. NIST's mandate is to determine the precise sequence of structural failure and to make recommendations that could prevent similar collapses in buildings across the United States. Their preliminary findings, published in 2022, identified the pool deck and parking garage slab as the likely origin point of the progressive collapse, consistent with what Morabito had flagged in 2018. The lot at 8777 Collins Avenue in Surfside, where Champlain Towers South stood for 40 years, is empty now. In December 2021, the site was sold at auction for $120 million to a developer affiliated with the Edelstein family, according to reporting by the Miami Herald and confirmed in Miami-Dade property records. New construction on the site has been discussed. Nothing has been built. In the state of Florida, the collapse accelerated significant legislative action. In May 2022, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed Senate Bill 4D into law, the most significant condominium structural safety legislation in the state's history. The law requires mandatory structural inspections for all condominium buildings 3 stories or taller that are 30 years old or older. It requires HOAs to maintain fully funded reserve accounts for structural repairs. It eliminated the practice, previously legal under Florida law, of HOA boards voting to waive reserve funding requirements. That waiver provision, which had allowed buildings to defer costly reserve contributions and which had contributed to the inadequate reserve funds at Champlain Towers South, no longer exists in Florida law. Champlain Towers South is not a story about a building that gave no warning. It gave a detailed, documented, professionally prepared warning in October of 2018. The warning named the problem. It described the location. It included photographs. It estimated the cost. It stated, in writing, that delay would make conditions worse. What followed was not ignorance. It was a sequence of decisions about money, about timing, about competing priorities, made by people who had access to the same document. That is the most important thing to understand about this case. And it is the thing the headline number, 98 deaths, $997 million settlement, does not fully convey. The Morabito report sat in the HOA's files for 2 years and 8 months. It is 24 pages long. It is a public document. You can read it. According to the Community Associations Institute, the national trade organization representing HOA governance in the United States, an estimated 40% of the country's roughly 370,000 community associations are currently operating with inadequate reserve funding for major structural repairs. Champlain Towers South was not an anomaly. It was a documented warning about one building that carries implications for tens of thousands of others. Next time on the Realty Files. In 2009, a man named Alan Stanford was arrested by federal agents at a golf course in Virginia. He was the founder of Stanford Financial Group. He had told investors their money was held in safe, high-yield certificates of deposit at his offshore bank in Antigua. The Securities and Exchange Commission had been investigating him since 1997. 12 years. During which time, according to the SEC's own enforcement filings, he collected over $7 billion from approximately 30,000 investors across 113 countries. Almost none of it was where he said it was. This is the Realty Files. If this episode gave you something to think about, like it, share it, and subscribe. Every episode on this channel is built on real documents, real court records, and real consequences. No hype, no filler, just the full story. We'll see you in the next one.